On October 20, 1916, in Sevastopol Bay, 15 minutes after the morning flag raising, an explosion occurred on a battleship of the Russian Empire. A column of flame and smoke reached a height of 300 meters. After the smoke dispersed, it was observed that the ship's bow section had been torn off. The conning tower was deformed, and the battleship began to list. The battleship Imperatritsa Mariya sank in its harbor under circumstances classified as mysterious. To understand the context of this event, it is necessary to consider the preceding circumstances that arose 6 years earlier. In January 1910, Russia's Ministry of Naval Affairs received information that caused serious concern. Turkey had acquired 2 Brandenburg-class battleships from Germany and 8 torpedo boats and destroyers from France. Until this time, the fleet of the Russian Empire held superiority in the Black Sea. The Turkish fleet was not considered a significant threat. However, the situation began to change. In the following months, a trend for building dreadnoughts spread. Great Britain commissioned the battleship Dreadnought, which by its appearance rendered most existing battleships obsolete. Turkey also joined this naval procurement program. In 1911, a contract was signed in Great Britain for the construction of 3 dreadnoughts for the Ottoman Empire: Rishadiye, Sultan Osman, and Fatih. This information caused serious concern in the Russian Naval Ministry. Naval Minister Ivan Konstantinovich Grigorovich noted in his diary, "The period from 1914 to 1915 will be critical for us in terms of war with Turkey. If the latter receives the dreadnoughts it ordered before our battleships are ready." 4 Sevastopol-class battleships were under construction in the Baltic, but they were intended for potential confrontation with the German fleet. This left the Black Sea Fleet in a vulnerable position regarding the strengthening of the Ottoman fleet. On September 23, 1910, a report on urgent measures to strengthen the Black Sea Fleet was presented to the Council of Ministers. The Ministry of Naval Affairs calculated that to maintain military superiority in the Black Sea, it was necessary to promptly commission 3 new battleships, 9 destroyers, and 6 submarines. Design timelines were limited. Dreadnoughts for the Ottoman Empire were already being built in Great Britain, and a delay in starting construction of Russian ships would increase the imbalance of power. It was decided to use the design of the Baltic Sevastopol-class battleships as a basis, adapting it for the conditions of the Black Sea within the shortest possible time frame. This allowed for a reduction in design time. On June 9, 1911, technical specifications for the project were sent to several enterprises, including the Russian Shipbuilding Society, Nikolaev Yard, and Krupp Works in Germany. A competition for project development was announced. The Naval Technical Committee selected the proposals from the Russian Shipbuilding Society and Nikolaev Yard. The project envisioned the creation of a battleship with a displacement of approximately 23,000 tons, equipped with 12 305 mm main caliber guns located in 4 turrets. Armor protection was significantly strengthened. The main armor belt had a thickness of 262.5 millimeters, and the turrets were protected by 250 millimeter plates. Significant attention was given to the anti-torpedo caliber. The use of 130 millimeter guns was planned for engaging high-speed torpedo boats. On October 11, 1911, 3 battleships under construction were added to the lists of the Black Sea Fleet: Imperatritsa Mariya, Imperator Alexander III, and Yekaterina II. On October 17 of the same year, the keel-laying ceremonies for all 3 ships took place simultaneously. Significant construction activity was observed in Nikolaev. Thousands of workers were engaged in building these ships around the clock. According to the contract, the launching of Imperatritsa Mariya was to take place no later than July 1914, with full readiness planned by August 20, 1915. Construction proceeded at an accelerated pace. On October 6, 1913, the hull of Imperatritsa Mariya was launched from the factory slipway in Nikolaev into the waters of the southern Bug. The battleship had the following characteristics: a length of 167.5 meters, a width of almost 27 meters, 4 triple gun turrets, 2 tall funnels, and a powerful superstructure. However, a significant amount of time remained until its commissioning. The installation of 20 boilers, the mounting of turbine units, and the equipping with all armament and equipment were yet to come. Then, a supply problem arose. The turbines for Imperatritsa Mariya had been ordered in England from the John Brown factory. In the spring of 1914, the political situation in Europe was noted to be deteriorating. The Russian Shipbuilding Society actively requested the British side to accelerate shipment, believing that the delivery of equipment would become impossible in the event of war. The shipment of turbines took place in May 1914. An English steamer passed through the Straits several weeks before the outbreak of the First World War. A 1-month delay in supplies could have led to different consequences. By November 1914, it became evident that the original deadlines could not be met. The Ministry of Marine agreed to postpone the ship's readiness date to March-April 1915, but further delays were unacceptable. Active naval operations were developing in the Black Sea. The Turkish fleet, reinforced by the German battlecruiser Goeben and the light cruiser Breslau, which had broken through the Dardanelles, was carrying out active operations. Goeben shelled Russian ports and sank transports, tying up the actions of the entire fleet. Every day of delay led to new losses. All efforts were directed towards the speedy completion of work, and in the spring of 1915, the battleship prepared to put to sea. The day came when the ship was withdrawn from the factory and began operations. By the evening of June 23, 1915, after a consecration ceremony, the St. Andrew's flag and pennant were raised over Ingolsky roadstead. Imperatritsa Mariya began her campaign. In the deep night of June 25th, with the aim of traversing the river before daylight, the battleship cast off its moorings and began to move at 4 o'clock in the morning. The ship passed Zhirgorsky Lighthouse and entered Ochakov roadstead, ready to repel a possible mine attack. The following day, trial firings of the guns were conducted. On June 27, the battleship arrived in Odessa under the escort of aircraft, destroyers, and minesweepers. The main forces of the fleet formed 3 lines of cover up to the Bosphorus and remained at sea to prevent a possible attack by the cruiser Goeben. Having taken on 700 tons of coal, Imperatritsa Mariya put to sea on the afternoon of June 29, following the cruiser Pamiat Mercuria. At 5 o'clock in the morning on June the 30th, 1915, Empress Maria entered Sevastopol roadstead. This event had been awaited by the Black Sea Fleet for over a year. The ship's arrival caused a significant public response, comparable to the return of the 84 gunship Empress Maria under Nachimov's command to the same roadstead in November 1853 after the victory at Sinope. Numerous city residents gathered on the embankments. Officers and sailors of other ships lined up on the decks. From that moment on, the fleet possessed a ship capable of confronting the cruiser Goeben, which until then had been operating in the Black Sea. It was assumed that with the commissioning of Empress Maria, the activity of Goeben and Breslau outside their bases would be restricted. Within these expectations, the ship Maria was assigned a significant position in the fleet. In August, there was a change in the command staff. Prince Trubetskoy was appointed head of the Mine Brigade. Captain First Rank Kuznetsov assumed command of Empress Maria. Despite the fact that not all of the ship's mechanisms had been fully brought to combat perfection, it was engaged in operations. acceptance trials began, conducted under combat conditions. On July the 9th, the battleship was placed in the dry dock of Sevastopol port for inspection and painting of the underwater hull section. Simultaneously, measurements were taken of clearances in the stern tube bearings and propeller shaft brackets. 10 days later, while the ship was in dock, the Commission proceeded to test the underwater torpedo tubes. After the battleship was removed from the dock, the tubes underwent firing trials and were accepted by the Commission. On August 6, 1915, the battleship put to sea for trials of its anti-mine caliber artillery. On board was the commander of the Black Sea Fleet, Admiral Andrei Avgustovich Eberhardt. On August the 25th, acceptance trials concluded, although work on perfecting the ship continued for subsequent months. By order of the fleet commander, to correct the trim by the bow, the ammunition of 2 forward turrets was reduced from 100 to 70 rounds, and that of the forward group of 130 mm guns from 245 to 100 rounds. It was assumed that after Empress Maria entered service, the cruiser Goeben would limit its activity outside the Bosphorus. The fleet gained the ability to systematically and on a broader scale carry out its strategic tasks. Mobile formations were established for operational actions at sea. On September the 30th, 1915, Maria, together with the cruiser Kagel and destroyers, covered the fleet's strike detachment, which included the battleships Tri Sviatitelya, Ioan Zlatust, and Pantelemon, the cruisers Almaz and Pamiat Merkulia, as well as 7 destroyers. The aforementioned ships struck enemy targets in the southwestern part of the sea. More than 1,200 shells were fired at Zonguldak, Kozlu, and Kilimli. This was the first major operation involving the new battleship, and it concluded successfully. Turkish coal ports burned, steamships in the roadsteads sank, and coastal batteries were suppressed. On November 1st and 2nd, the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya and the cruiser Pamiat Merkuria, carrying out fire control of the exit from the Bosphorus, covered the actions of the Russian Empire's fleet squadron in the coal region. On November 23 and 25, the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya was again in this area. Fires were recorded in the port of Zonguldak and on vessels anchored in the roadstead. The squadron proceeded along the coast of the Ottoman Empire, sinking 2 enemy vessels. The intensity of the combat activity of the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya increased. On February 2nd and 4th, 1916, it covered a squadron providing naval support to ground forces near Trebizond. The forces of the Ottoman Empire were repelled, after which an operation followed to transfer troops to reinforce the coastal detachment. Between September and December 1915, maneuver groups sailed to enemy shores 10 times and spent 29 days at sea. Bosphorus, Zonguldak, Novorossiysk, Batumi, Trebizond, Varna, Constanta. The long and low silhouette of the battleship was observed along various sections of the Black Sea coast. For more than 1 year, the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya participated in combat cruises. In the autumn of 1915, it covered a strike group of Russian Empire fleet ships in an operation aimed at cutting off the main bases of the Ottoman Empire's fleet from the Zonguldak coal region. In November, the ship again went out to blockade the coal region. However, the pursuit of the cruiser Goeben remained an unattainable task. The ship's speed characteristics, reduced during the design phase by at least 2 knots, were considered a factor hindering success in pursuit. On July 9, 1916, information was received about the cruiser Breslau setting out to conduct an operation near Novorossiysk. The newly appointed commander of the Black Sea Fleet, Vice Admiral Alexander Vasilievich Kolchak, immediately put to sea on the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya. The courses and departure time of Breslau were known. the interception point was determined. Seaplanes accompanying the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya bombed submarines awaiting its departure, thereby preventing their attack. Destroyers proceeding ahead of the battleship intercepted Breslau at the designated point and engaged it in combat. The destroyers performed maneuvers, forcing the German cruiser to approach the shore, while Imperatritsa Mariya relentlessly followed it at full speed. The crew of the German cruiser, observing the silhouette of the battleship, realized the potential threat of being hit by 305 mm shells. The battleship prepared to unleash a salvo. The cruiser Breslau, actively maneuvering despite its speed of 27 knots, reduced the straight-line distance with the battleship, which decreased from 136 to 90 cable lengths. According to German historians, the engines of the German cruiser were operating at their endurance limit. Further rapprochement by the battleship created a threat of Breslau being destroyed by heavy shells. However, the outcome changed due to a natural phenomenon. A sudden squall covered the cruiser in a curtain of rain. The cruisers continued, and artillery shelled the ports of the Ottoman Empire. By the autumn of 1916, the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya had spent dozens of days at sea, fired thousands of shells, and covered numerous operations. The ship acquired significant status as a unit of the naval fleet in the Black Sea. However, within a few weeks, it was destined to face a tragic event in Sevastopol harbor. On October 20th, 1916, the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya was located in Sevastopol Bay along with other ships, having completed another voyage. Approximately 15 minutes after the morning flag hoist, personnel in the vicinity of the first turret detected a noise characteristic of burning gunpowder, and then observed smoke and flames emanating from the turret's embrasures, hatches, and nearby ventilation openings. A fire alarm was sounded on the ship. The crew used fire hoses to supply water to the compartment beneath the turret, taking measures to localize the blaze. In the magazines beneath this turret, tons of gunpowder charges for the 305 mm guns were stored. At 0620, a powerful explosion occurred on the ship in the area of the first turret's charge magazine. The explosion resulted in a column of flame and smoke up to 300 meters high, and the shock wave caused a loud roar that spread throughout the bay. After the smoke dissipated, significant damage was revealed. A section of the deck behind the first turret was destroyed, and the conning tower, bridge, forward funnel, and foremast were swept away. A large damage formed in the ship's hull behind the turret, from which deformed metal structures, flames, and smoke were observed. A significant number of sailors and non-commissioned officers who were in the forward part of the ship were killed, wounded, or thrown overboard by the force of the explosion. The blast wave damaged the primary auxiliary machinery line, which led to the stoppage of fire pumps and the blackout of electrical lighting. The ship plunged into darkness. Subsequently, a series of less significant explosions occurred. Orders were given to flood the magazines of the second, third, and fourth turrets to prevent further spread of the fire, and the ship was turned broadside to the wind by a tugboat to minimize the fire's spread. In the 7th boiler room, having received orders to raise steam, the stokers commenced their duties. A sudden increase in the ship's list led to the evacuation of personnel from the compartment. Midshipman Ignatiev ordered his subordinates to ascend to the deck, stating his intention to personally close the valves. The crew quickly climbed the ladders. At that moment, the ship capsized. Only some of the personnel managed to escape, while the rest, including Midshipman Ignatiev, remained inside. Subsequently, after the battleship was raised, human remains were discovered in the boiler room. Total casualties on the battleship amounted to 216 killed and 232 wounded. Admiral Kolchak, commander of the Black Sea Fleet, expressed concern over the loss of the ship. He immediately submitted a resignation report, which was not approved by the Emperor. According to the records of Rear Admiral Bubnov, Chief of the Naval Directorate of the Imperial Headquarters, Admiral Kolchak considered himself responsible for what had occurred in the fleet under his command, and attributed the loss of the battleship to his own oversight. It is reported that he limited communication and refused to eat, which caused concern among those around him. His Chief of Staff reported this by direct wire to the headquarters. In response, the Emperor ordered to immediately proceed to Sevastopol and inform Kolchak of his lack of blame for the loss of the Imperatritsa Mariya, confirm his favor, and order him to continue commanding the fleet. By order of the highest command, a commission was established to investigate the causes of the battleship Imperatritsa Mariya's loss. The commission included Admiral Kolchak, commander of the Black Sea Fleet, and shipbuilder Krylov. The investigation established the picture of what had happened to the battleship. During the Commission's work, hundreds of officers and sailors from the battleship who survived the incident were interrogated. The materials of the Maria case numbered thousands of pages. Two theories were put forward: spontaneous combustion of gunpowder and negligence in handling munitions. However, artillery officers unanimously testified that high-quality gunpowder, which could not spontaneously combust, had been supplied to the Imperatritsa Mariya. When questioned by the Commission about the possibility of unhindered access to the powder magazine, Prince Urusov, the ship's artillery commander, replied that the hatch was not locked and access was unhindered. During the ship's stay in Sevastopol, representatives from various factories worked on the battleship. A name-by-name check of the workers was not carried out. The conclusion indicated the probability of a deliberate explosion. The Commission's work continued for many months. From Sevastopol to Petrograd, crates were sent containing interrogation protocols, drawings, charred metal fragments, remnants of exploded shell casings, and ammunition hoists. Every document fragment or charred bolt became a subject of detailed study and debate among engineers, artillerymen, and researchers. Kolchak demanded absolute precision. He personally inspected the hull wreckage, descended into the burnt-out compartments where the smell of burning and fuel oil still lingered, and interrogated eyewitnesses. As the investigation progressed, it became obvious that the role of random factors in the incident was insignificant. Among the documents delivered to the Commission, a special place was occupied by reports on the movement of unauthorized persons on board the battleship several days before the tragedy. It was established that on the eve of the explosion, specialists from the Baltic shipyard, invited to inspect the ventilation system, were working on the Maria. None of the officers knew them by name, and no document verification was carried out. Several witnesses claimed to have seen an unknown person in a worker's jacket descending into the forward compartments without escort. Other witnesses reported wooden boxes being thrown overboard on the night before the explosion, presumably containing unnecessary tools. These scattered testimonies did not form a complete picture, but collectively indicated the probability of a meticulously prepared act of sabotage. Technical expertise confirmed that the source of the fire was in the charge loading compartment of the first turret. The explosion did not originate from an external fire, but from within, as if the ignition had occurred directly in the loading tube. The angle of the holes and the direction of metal charring indicated an instantaneous expulsion of gases from bottom to top. Artillery Officer Urusov expressed to the Commission his opinion that what happened could not have been an accident. Foreign newspapers published articles asserting that the Russian dreadnought had been destroyed as a result of actions by foreign agents. Kolchak took this information into account, acknowledging the presence of a threat from spies in Sevastopol, but noting the difficulty of proving their involvement. Without confirmed evidence, the incident involving the battleship Maria could have remained unsolved. Meanwhile, work continued in the harbor. Cranes carefully lifted twisted armor plates, remnants of turrets, and parts of guns from the water. Specialists from the Nikolaev shipyard arrived to assess the possibility of salvaging the hull. Despite the colossal destruction, it was established that most of the ship had survived. The engine room and the middle section remained sealed. At Kolchak's initiative, a decision was made to raise the battleship Maria, motivated by the memory of those who perished. This decision was perceived by some of the fleet's personnel as a display of resolve. By the spring of 1917, against the backdrop of intensifying political unrest in the country, the salvage operations were carried out intensively. Water was pumped out of the compartments by powerful pumps. Divers, working inside, discovered the bodies of officers. They were buried with full military honors on the northern side. Each burial ceremony was accompanied by expressions of sorrow from the city's inhabitants amidst a general silence. The investigative commission completed its work in early March. Its conclusions were formulated with caution. The cause of the explosion was not established with certainty. The most probable cause cited was the ignition of gunpowder gases due to careless handling or malicious intent. Unofficially, however, sabotage was rumored. During the same period, the first demonstrations began in Petrograd. Reports of the battleship's loss were less noticeable amidst other unfolding events. The state was experiencing a period of systemic crisis, which diminished public interest in investigating the causes of the incident. Admiral Kolchak, showing signs of fatigue, observed the remains of the ship from the embankment. According to subordinates' testimonies, he sometimes visited the site of the incident alone and observed the visible parts of the vessel protruding above the water's surface. Reportedly, Kolchak expressed to a flag officer the thought that the ship had perished for the state, and voiced apprehension that the state itself might suffer the same fate. The battleship Empress Maria was raised in 1918 after the collapse of the then existing political system. The hull, extracted from the water, had significant damage caused by time and corrosion. The new administration viewed it not as a symbol, but as a source of materials. The armor was removed from the ship Maria, its guns were dismantled, and the remaining hull was scrapped. Thus, the event marked the end of a certain historical period. Other ships of the same series, Emperor Alexander III and Empress Catherine the Great, also found themselves amidst political instability. One of them was subsequently operated under a new flag, while the other was scuttled to prevent its capture by the enemy. Nevertheless, the battleship Maria remained in the memory of some fleet members as a significant object. Some former senior officers sometimes mentioned the ship Maria in their memoirs, attributing symbolic meaning to it and expressing regret for the bygone era.